Hello. I'm gonna wander into the political here a little bit. Actually, not even the political. This is gonna be weird. This is the economic. I know, right? Like, why is someone who's been focusing on religious things for the last 2 years changing his mind? If you don't know, my name's Aaron Klein. Like, in case you were wondering, I've strayed away from world events for a while now to stay out of political discourse because the how I put this, society is under the spell of the elites. That's the shortest, simplest answer. Um, the elites have woven a fabric of, I wouldn't necessarily say lies. They've woven a worldview for people to live within. So when I go online, I can see the worldview that other people are trying to push onto me. So the short answer is I'm avoiding the magic circle. But sometimes it is useful to look to see where things are. But today is weird. I'm wanting to talk economics because I have a very different worldview than what was pushed on to me when I was a child. And I wanted to discuss some things based on that. So first of all, I'm gonna just say some. I'm gonna explain some lies so that I can paint a correct picture here. First of all, if you don't understand what GDP is, it is the amount of money that is transferred between people that the government reports. So when the U.S. is saying it has record high GDP, and then you see people uh, living in debt, masses of people living in debt, we're in an economic crisis, but the U.S. gets to spout out massive numbers. So they're not technically lying, but in practice they're lying. China just outright lies. If you haven't noticed in the last couple years, it's it's not entirely clear the amount of people that actually live in China. In fact, odds are they are probably 20 to 40% lower in population than we've been told. Especially after COVID, they probably still are overreporting people, but there were incentives from within inside China for doctors to lie about the people that were still alive. There's incentive for fraud in China, massive incentive for fraud. Um, there's just lots of incentive for people to lie in China. Therefore, odds are the Chinese government's going to lie too. Don't get that wrong. And it's not just top level speaks. It's all the way down. Little infractions here and there build up. Odds are somewhere between 20 and 40% of the numbers we had in 2010 were just fabricated. So we don't know if China actually is above like 1 trillion people anymore. In fact, we're pretty certain it's not. At one point, I think we thought it had 1 trillion people or so. It's clearly not. I'm just putting things into perspective here about how numbers lie. Also, in case you're wondering, most people in China live in squalor. And we're just used to seeing what the elites look like and behave like. Because they want to paint a picture just like the US wants to paint a picture, just like South Korea wants to paint a picture, just like Europe wants to paint a picture. I'm going through this as procedurally as I can. And this isn't just going to be economic, but I'm going to try to bring it back to the economic world we live in. So what was that? That was GDP. Most of the GDP data is lying to you. Do not believe it. But also to put things into perspective, worldview-wise, how countries are behaving. Australia's housing market is insanely overinflated. We're talking like 700, 800, $1 million houses that look like $200,000 houses here in the U.S. Um, Canada's even worse, by the way, because they're trying to sell a hyper overregulated amount of houses to people who have investor levels of wealth to rent out to people who already cannot afford to live in their overregulated cities. Um, I think just to break even uh, on all the regulatory measures that you have to meet in like Quebec, you are already looking at like you can't like in order for the manufacturers, the housing producers to be able to make houses or to fix houses, the costs are just astronomical, just in legal fees and procedure. It's that way also in the U.S.'s major cities, but it's not nearly as bad. But like it's really bad in Canada. In Europe, especially in like places like Britain, they have an immigration problem that is so bad. You could not pay me to go live there. But not only that, you couldn't pay me enough to even like support myself there. Their housing market is exploding, mostly because they have it's a twofold issue. One, they've for a very long time they've catered directly to the wealthiest people there to draw investors, but in doing so, they've they've way overinflated the housing market because investors like to buy property, and then they like to buy a lot of property when they want to park assets places. They've made like almost zero money on the people that they've brought in. So like they charge like negligible amounts of taxes on people over a certain money threshold. Then the other issue is they have a whole bunch of immigration. I'm talking massive amounts, and it's mostly because they have a welfare style healthcare system, and they keep giving money to people who do not produce things. So there is a lot of people from Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, the Arab countries and Arab speaking countries that come over to the European countries that are seeking handouts, and they're getting it. So somewhere within their political system, they have basically all their politicians are bought out, such that they will either bought out or their worldview, their religious underpinning system, their religious operating system has incentivized them to turn a blind eye to the problems of the normal Europeans. So, like, it's really bad. In Britain, they don't own guns. The few that people that do is for hunting for recreation. And that's, like, ridiculous. Because now the government is literally censoring people for hate speech. Like, they're arresting people for hate speech. And the issue is, it's allowing people with really bad intentions to come over and exploit the British people. There are massive grape gangs, I'm going to say it with a G there if you get my drift, that are just roaming Britain. There's massive amounts of Pakistanis. It's not just in Britain, but it's most, like, that's one of the official, like, that's one of the really big issues, but, like, in other parts of Europe, there's massive amounts of Muslims that are committing heinous acts, that are saying heinous things that the police are actually protecting. Europe is just really bad, and because of all the major amounts of people coming into the countries, the housing market is completely unstable. It just keeps going up and up and up. Um, Now, I don't think that most Britons know that it's not necessarily the immigration that's the issue. It is the billionaires and the trillionaires that are sitting around with all their massive amounts of cash that keep purchasing things. That's actually one of the bigger issues. The world in general has a wealth disparity issue, and that's it's a really big problem. What other world events are being hidden? Also, if you haven't really heard about it lately, in the last 30 years, the Uyghur Muslims in China have been heavily persecuted. Other issues. This one's going to sound conspiratorial, but the Israeli elites have been wreaking havoc on the world. They keep attacking places that they know they shouldn't. They are. I'm going to say this now. It's the elites of Israel. It has nothing to do with Jews or Judaism. The elites of Israel are putting their own people at risk and doing and killing an absolute truckload of Muslims in their surroundings to hold on to land, which is, how do I put this? Its only profit is its vicinity. So that way they can milk America for their controlled version of intelligence. That, like, Israel, their elites are literally selling intelligence and systems. That is what they do. It has nothing to do with their, like, that's their major export. Don't look at the numbers they're projecting. That is what they're selling. They are great at intelligence, but they're also really good at spinning narratives to their best interest, and that's what's been going on. So, I'm not going into the conspiracy land here to say how much they've had influence over America, but what I will say is what they sell us is their version of the intelligence. And that's what they're going to sell the world, because it serves them so much better. In case you're wondering, there is no moral conundrum for them to lie. That is there is, it is a Christian-driven one, not a Jewish-driven one. But don't worry, most of the world doesn't have that. Like, that's not an issue for most of the world. The few Christian countries, I shouldn't say few. The Christian countries around the world are the ones that have set that as a standard that morally you shouldn't lie. Now, there are a lot more traditions that say you should pursue the truth, but Christianity, it's not Judaism. Judaism is you shouldn't give false witness, as like you shouldn't be accusing people of shit that they're not they're not actively doing. And it's even more so, it gets even more hairy when you start talking law, but you can intentionally sculpt narrative without ever actually giving a direct lie, but you can still completely obfuscate the truth. And that is something that Christians are very much against. Where was I going with all this? Oh, economics. So I'm pretty sure that the world that we live in is in a very bad economic system right now. The majority of the world is built on debt. And that's not good. And I'm gonna say this now, there is a boatload of Americans that are just struggling to live on debt right now. They're taking out credit cards, they have car payments, they have mortgages. Um, I think mortgages are okay, and then as you get down from there, it gets really bad. People are doing buy now, pay later, and then just not paying later. And those companies don't report to credit agencies, which is a mistake. There's a whole bunch of debt in the world that isn't being regulated, and the stuff that is, it's doing a lot of damage. And the reason why I'm setting that up is because I think that we're about to go through a Japan-style economic crash, except the rest of the world, wasn't like Japan. Japan had most Japanese people had reserves of cash to sit on while they suffered through it. We don't. We have debt. I'm pretty sure our banks are all going to start collapsing when the cracks start growing, when they start pervading, when we start having leaks sprout. Um, we've we've like our economy just started, like our Federal Reserve just started quantitative easing again, and that is not what you want to be doing. They're trying to prevent an economic collapse by rapidly inflating our currency. Like they're just doing gas break, gas break, gas break to try to not collapse everything. And the issue is between our government and our banks, there is so much debt circulating that um, the issue is those who are not holding assets but cash, the people who hold cash like me are going to suffer the most for the next couple of years until there's a whole bunch of debt that has to be called in. And it's not going to be pretty because most people don't have the cash. Most companies don't have the cash. They've had cheap money for so long that when debts start getting called in to fill in the reserves, they're just not going to be able to produce it. I'm pretty sure that very soon, major banks are going to show that they don't have the liquid, they don't have the cash because they've loaned out too much money. But until then, my currency that I've been saving up for a house with has been slowly its purchasing power has been evaporated off. And to put things into perspective, 2 years ago when I started buying silver, I've stopped. I have I'm not gonna say the total amount I have, but I was buying silver at $20 and $30 an ounce. It's now 67. It's 67. It was at an all-time high back at 50 something, I think it capped at 50 back a while ago, and then was shorted forever down to $20 an ounce, and now it's at 67. Good news is that money was well invested. I don't intend to barter with it anymore. I intend to exit most of my savings and liquidate my silver in a couple of months and put a down payment on a house. I'm not going to say how much I have saved up, but it's a sizable amount such that I can, between my silver and my savings, I have enough for a down payment on a lower than average house in Columbus. The average is about 200,000 right now, or like 170. I can get something decent but lower, or I can probably look in the surrounding area. That's roughly the amount of cash I have saved up, plus the silver I have saved up. The scary thing is I don't know how much I actually want to liquidate of my silver, because I have a substantial amount of it as constitutional silver, and once that's melted, that's not coming back, and I need that for bartering. That's what most people are going to want for bartering anyways. And if coin sellers get that stuff, they're just going to send it back to the smelters. And they do not want it. The smelters, have been looking at that and they're just like, oh, no, 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 you do not want to do that. There's a lot of, I've heard stories of some of them not taking constitutional. Um, Silver's at 67 cents, well, $67 an ounce, which is nuts. And you can look this up. I'm pretty sure like we're about to go through an economic collapse. That's why silver's been ratcheting up, and that's not a good thing. The job market is really bad. There's a lot of people who don't have jobs and who can't find them right now. It's not as bad in like Indiana, but like there's a lot of blue collar, not blue collar. There's a lot of desk jobs, probably blue collar. I don't know the color coding there. I just simply there's a lot of desk jobs that have been artificially cut and laid off with the claims of AI, and then directly intentionally filled by, I'm gonna say the nationality because it's heinous, and I'm directly calling out our business owning elites. They're being filled with Indians. I have nothing against the people from India. I do have an issue with our tech elites and our business elites saying Americans shouldn't have jobs. They're too expensive. We've got to abuse H-1B visas to liquidate as much of our workforce and underpay these people such that we can save that money. And it's all going straight into stock buybacks. And it's not just stock buybacks. Let me put this very clearly. Most stock buybacks are buying back stocks from the executives. They are paying themselves out. We live in a world where our economic elites are lying to our faces and then using the cut costs to buy themselves out of their stake in their own company. They are intentionally crippling their own companies and then buying themselves out on the highs, and they're just riding it as long as they can. And to put things into perspective, I actually can do some of the math. I work for Kroger. I know exactly the staffing. Like, I can ask my boss at any time, what other staffing hours we have this week? How many people do we have scheduled? How many people are they not letting us hire? I can go through that math with my boss. She's cool with it. She will talk that kind of stuff with me. We have a whole bunch of minors right now. In case you're wondering what that means corporate knows they do not want to pay out overtime. It is ridiculous. Management is telling me, do not do overtime. If you do need to use overtime, let us know. That's basically them saying, don't use overtime, please, for the love of God. And like, I used to get roughly 2 or 3 hours a week of overtime. I'm at 0 now. That's sort of by design. I do not want to have to report to people. I just do not want to talk to my bosses. My current store manager is a worse asshole than the last one I had. And I'm not going to say the words out loud because there's really bad politics behind the scenes at my job right now. I love most of my assistant managers. I'm going to leave it at that. But there's a clear issue. But like, to put things in perspective though, every business is intentionally cutting costs. The reason why I was talking about minors go to school. They will not hit overtime. If they work 30 hours a week, that is like crazy numbers. And they are not full-time, so they're not going to get full-time pay. They're not going to get as you work longer for Kroger, your pay rate increases. I make $19.60 an hour. I'm just being honest there. I will divulge stuff about myself, but not about others. So they do not want me getting overtime. It's but they'll hire as many miners as they can. And it's like, I'm pretty sure it's coming down from on top, because like it's becoming a really big issue where I do not have enough adults, where I have to abandon my U scan when I'm in charge. I have to run a U scan usually while I'm running everyone's breaks during prime time, and it's so bad because I'll usually have maybe two other adults with me during the busiest hours. So I am constantly the person that, like, the way my Kroger works. I have one U scan way over on the pharmacy end. I have 5 registers available, and then 2 more U scans. And then there's an old abandoned U scan that we like barely use except during really busy seasons. Like probably right now they probably have it open. It's a Saturday, so yeah, they probably have it open. But um, usually I need one adult to run the one that we usually keep open on the pharmacy, and at least one adult on one of the U scans on the grocery side, and I can have one miner parked with them. Then I can throw the rest of the miners on registers. But what that means is if I'm on the one that's by the grocery, that is like that one's like barely staffed, because I have to be everywhere. I have to be 5 people when that happens. I have to answer managers. I have to answer my cashiers. I have to, and I also have to answer to those 6 people. Those 6 people on my U scans are not getting the best care. Um, and it's like really obvious that I'm going everywhere. I get in 20,000 steps a day easily. Um, but the reason why I'm saying this is all the corporations are stretching their workforces as thin as possible, and it's and they're intentionally damaging their own companies to prop up GDP, and they're intentionally also damaging their own companies to buy back stock to increase their shareholders' value. It's ridiculous. Um, the and this is like consistent across countries, because all these countries are having major wealth discrepancies between their elites and down below. Oh, that's my light. That's too bright. I don't care right now, and that's mostly too bright because it's daylight outside. Um, so yeah, we are. I think the world is. I think the places where debt is what's holding up our economy, it's gonna crack there and crash there first, like the U.S. But I think it's probably everywhere. Um, and the issue is, like, right now my U.S. dollars in my bank are evaporating off in value, and the one really important thing that I want to buy is a house, and those just keep going up. And by the way, houses are not appreciating assets. That is inflation. That's strictly just inflation. That's runaway inflation driving up the value of assets. Um, and also, in case you're wondering, all the same things that's being said about our stock market now is what was being said about Japan's. And then right when Japan's literally what happened with Japan was they had like bottom out interest rates for a while to keep the fire going, like fuel to a fire to keep their economy growing. And then the moment that their federal bank started increasing rates, everything stopped. It's just like they took the fuel off the fire and it stayed. And that's just exactly what's going on in Japan. That's what hit Japan, and they've had relative economic stagnancy for they had a massive 40-year gap where they just have had economic stagnancy. And that's that is what happens when everyone has reserves to survive it. We're going to go through a massive economic crash. It's going to be way worse in 2008 because everyone is on debt. if most people were held cash, it, the while the government was printing money, at, while everything was like, at least even though their stuff was being inflated away, their purchasing power, at least they had the cash. So that way, when the government stopped spending because everything went into an economic crash, at least they didn't have, like, at least people weren't like losing shit. They weren't like having to sell their houses and sell their cars, and that's what's gonna happen here. We're gonna have a massive, like, everything's gonna go on a fire sale because banks are gonna have to start calling in debts, and people are just gonna be like, here, take my car, take my house. I don't have money. And then banks are going to be left with all these assets that aren't, like, they have to get the money back. They don't have, like, they need the money to fulfill their own debts to the people who deposited cash in their banks. By the way, that's what's going on. The bank's lending your cash, and when you want it back, they have to have the cash or they can't give it back to you. And they do not want to default to you because most people actually don't have a whole lot of cash in the bank. The bank is secure up to like $100,000 for most people, and then they have to pay FDIC insurance for that. After that, they literally just have to tell people above that, hey, all that cash that you had, we don't have it, so that goes directly into our pockets to pay out everyone else. It's going to be a buy-in. How do I put this? Instead of like they're not technically bankrupt, they just tell people above that certain amount, hey, you don't have that cash anymore. We just don't have it. You're not getting it. You can get up to 100,000 from the Federal Reserve. That's literally what's going to have to happen above 100,000, or I think it's like 250,000 now. Yeah, at one point when I was in high school, it was 100,000. Put that into perspective, though. When I was in high school, it was 100,000. Now it's like 250,000. Which is nuts. But most people don't have that kind of wealth in their bank accounts. But still, the few people that do have wealth in their bank accounts, not wealth, cash in their bank accounts, that is a loan to the bank. And the way the bank gets you value for that is they pay the fees on transactions. On very quick transaction times. So that's why when you go to buy groceries, you get charged really quick. The bank's covering the fees as part of your value exchange for giving them the cash. And it's not actually, usually it's the company, but the banks charge fees on that, but they also, like, the ability to just hold the money there for you and just to the banks are the ones that are paying all the storage fees, all the electric bills, all the servers. The banks are paying for all of that. They have a whole bunch of control because of that, but that's one of the reasons why they're not giving you a whole bunch of return on your checking account. It's liquid to them, and that's the cost that they have to have in order for you to keep money there. Sometimes they have less liquid, high interest savings accounts. They would rather prefer those because then that way they don't have, that's money that they know that you're not taking out, and you're not putting fee, like, they don't have to worry about that being charged. That's just on their books that they owe this money, but you're not calling it in. So they're going to give you a much lower fee. They're going to give you a much lower rate than what they charge because they have to make profit somehow on those loans, or else they can't pay you. But they're going to give you a lower rate than a direct treasury bond. That's how banks function. Most the vast majority of wealth that banks have are in U.S. Treasury bonds. Then after that, it's mortgages. Then after that, it's business loans and business assets that they've taken debt out against. yeah, um, we the majority of the world is going to have an economic collapse. Um, on the I think there's however I think there's going to be a change in the way the world functions pretty soon. I think what's going to have to happen is this is going to sound horrible. I think the best way from now on for people to um, I think if countries really wanted to change the way war works, what's going to have to change is that you're going to have to start. I think countries are going to have to start attacking banks in other countries in order to stop the war machine from going. Um, that sounds crazy, but like, if you if you drop a bomb on a sack of cash, you literally just burn the enemy's cash. How are they going to transact? How are they going to defend themselves? Um, because our economy is like you would. Okay, here's the issue: the world trades on U.S. dollars still. What happens when you burn your own money in someone else's stuff? What happens to the rest of the world then when you say we're gonna if you try to fight us, if you try to do something like I don't know why that's why they keep putting. In case you're wondering, when we went into Iraq, it was to put banks in Iraq. It was also for the oil, but it was twofold: oil and banks. Um, we had to get both in there because we had to get U.S. dollars there. Um, that's what's going on. So one thing that you, in theory, could do is if we weren't all in U.S. dollars, one way to fight a war would be to just literally drop bombs on banks. You could have like near zero. You could just do it at night. You could have near zero casualties and just cripple a country's economy. And the only reason why we haven't been like doing that, I don't know why we didn't start doing that in World War II. Um, the only reason why we haven't been doing that is because we've all been working on U.S. dollars. But I think as we get to I think this is the next phase of war, of hot war at least. I think we've already been seeing fifth and sixth dimensional, not dimensional, generational warfare for a long time. We've been in those. What it is literally narrative control. It is astroturfing and narrative control. And in case you're also wondering, that means that our elites have been doing guerrilla sixth dimensional warfare on us for the last like 50, 60 years. War has radically changed. It's literally astroturfing, and like astroturfing is one major way. It's when it's when you go through and change local politics artificially. That's the first way. It's when you use propaganda. The next way is literally just going the layer below that and changing the whole narrative underneath the society. That I'm not going into why all that works today, but that's the state of our world right now. That by the way, if you've watched this way, I am sorry. Like watched this long, I'm sorry that's taken me 40 minutes to get to that idea. But yeah, our world, we're about to go through a Japan style economic pause, but it's not going to be a pause. It's going to be a collapse because we've been built on debt.